Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Homage to the blessed, noble, and perfectly enlightened one.
Homage to the blessed, noble, and perfectly enlightened one.
Namo sadanto suce doye alahadi samya samputoche.
Namo sadanto suce doye alahadi samya samputoche.
无上甚深微妙法，百千万劫难遭遇。我今见闻得受持，愿解如来真实义。The unsurpassed, deep, profound, subtle, wonderful Dharma, in 100,000 million eons, is difficult to encounter. Now that I've come to receive and hold it within my sight and hearing, I vow to fathom the thus come one's true and actual meaning. Okay, welcome everybody. If I could invite everyone to turn to the front of the sutra in front of you. There's a title and a name of the assembly of Buddhas and Bodhisattvas that are associated with this sutra. And so we begin the sutra lecture by first invoking the sutra's name and the assembly. There's really a sense of inviting their energies to the assembly. So this is an opportunity to do that. So if we just really sincere in our hearts and chant it out loud, there's a very nice tune to follow along. So it's the front of the cover. Okay. Namo Da Fang Guang Fo Hua Yan Jing Hua Yan Nai Wei Fo Bu Sai. Namo Da Fang Guang Fo Hua Yan Jing Hua Yan Nai Wei Fo Bu Sai. Namo Da Fang Guang Fo Hua Yan Jing Hua Yan Nai Wei Fo Bu Sai. Namo Da Fang Guang Fo Hua Yan Jing Hua Yan Nai Wei Fo Bu Sai. Namo Da Fang Guang Fo Hua Yan Jing Hua Yan Nai Wei Fo Bu Sai. Namo Da Fang Guang Fo Hua Yan Jing Hua Yan Nai Wei Fo Bu Sai. Namo Da Fang Guang Fo Hua Yan Jing Hua Yan Nai Wei Fo Bu Sai.
Hello everyone, Amitofo, and welcome to another evening of Saturday lectures on the Avatamsaka Sutra. Today we will continue the sutra on page 47, and today being, the 18th. It's just 4 days and 2 weeks right after we are into the new year. And I hope everyone has made New Year resolutions, and hopefully everyone is able to keep resolutions for this year. Our tradition is that we start the lecture by reading the sutra text. But before we do that, we thought we'd just take a few minutes to revisit what we've been learning last week, because it has a direct connection to what we'll be going through this week as well.
Also said we would test people from last week, so we have a quick test.
Pop quiz. So last week, basically we went through how the Bodhisattva, through his cultivation on the faith ground, has finally, the time had come for him to apply all that he had learned. So what did he do? He used the 4 methods of gathering in living beings. Okay, does anyone remember what the 4 methods of gathering in living beings were? Last week I see a lot of smiles. I see someone holding a microphone. Yes, Suzanne? Giving, yes, that's one, giving. Kind words, that's the second one. 2 more. Kind words. Beneficial actions, that's right, 3. And the last one. Similarity in deeds, that's right. These are called the 4 ways of gathering in living beings. In other words, the Bodhisattva uses these 4 methods. What's the best way? To make friends, to make you like him. Not to make you like him, that's not his intention. He uses that to create positive, favorable affinities with people. So that if you hold him in a certain way, or if there's a certain connection that you have with this person, whenever there's an opportunity for him to help you, he knows that you will be more favorable to listen to him or to receive his help. So he uses these 4 ways not because he wants to be popular, but because he knows that by creating a good relationship with you, when the time comes for him to help you, he can help you, right? So how does he help you? So we went through, if you look at page 45 on our sutra text, the second paragraph at the bottom of the page. So first it goes through the 4 kinds: giving, kind words, beneficial actions, similarity in deeds. So remember, these are very, very important if you want to make friends. Okay, no matter where you go, if you use just any one of these, you will make friends. So it goes on to say how he uses these 4 kinds of gathering living beings in. There's a whole list of physical bodies. He proclaims the dharmas or the teachings of the Buddha. He explains the conducts of a bodhisattva, and so on. He manifests the calamities of birth and death. And then if you turn the page to page 47, we stopped right at the end of page 45 last week. So today we'll be continuing what other ways does he have to implement these 4 kinds of giving. And the second part of page 47, the second paragraph after the break, goes into more detail of the tools that he uses to help living beings. I think let's read the first section.
So maybe we can invite everybody to put their palms together, and we'll read the just the first top of page 46.
There are 2 places available in the front if anyone would like to fill up empty spots.
No pressure.
That's the penalty for coming late.
We have a full house. So page 46, the top of page 46. And we can all read the Chinese together. Practice your Chinese tones and Chinese pronunciation. And after we read it, we'll read the English together. Okay. 现大神通力教化众生，
现大圣通力教化众生，
以种种方便行教化众生。佛子，持菩萨摩诃萨，能如是勤方便，教化众生，心恒相续，持佛智慧，所作善根，无有退转，常亲修学殊胜恨法， on page 47.
We'll now read in English, but we can do that together.
Yeah.
Everyone ready? He displays great powers of spiritual penetrations to teach and transform living beings. He uses all kinds of expedient practices to teach and transform living beings. Disciples of the Buddha, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva, is able to use that diligent in expediently teaching and transforming living beings. His resolve constantly continues as he tends towards the Buddha's wisdom. In all the good roots he creates, there is no turning back. He always diligently practices and learns the dharmas of the most supreme practices. So we'll begin by, we have to introduce ourselves. My name is this is Jin-Chuan, and my name is Jin-He. So Jin-Chuan will first explain spiritual penetrations, and I have a story. It's a really nice story, and I'm telling you that because I really believe that it is. But I was supposed to begin with the story, but I felt that maybe it would be better for Jin-Chuan to explain more about spiritual penetrations before I begin with the story.
Okay. So the first line here is, he displays great powers of spiritual penetrations to teach and transform living beings. So in the English, we've worked with this word a lot, which is 神通. And with the word spiritual penetrations, it's a little bit, that was, I think, the first translation, which was a literal word-for-word translation, but I don't think quite does it, because it sounds like you're like trying to penetrate through something. It's got a little bit of that feeling behind it, in the sense that you're able to see things more clearly. You know, you can go through and see things, penetrate through things and see things more clearly. But what we found, probably a better translation might be spiritual powers. Sometimes we use psychic abilities. So for this week, maybe a list that people can learn if you're not familiar with it already is the 6 spiritual powers. Do people know the list as the 6 spiritual powers? Tap their head. Let's test. Let's see. So first one, what would you think of just one spiritual power would be what?
Some of them are the same as what Superman has.
Yeah.
That's a hint.
Say it again? To fly. Okay, that's one. That's actually part of a package. They call it the complete mastery of spiritual powers. So that one includes flying, kind of emitting fire from your body and water from your body, and be able to walk on water and go through solid objects. That's the mastery of spiritual powers. That's one. Magic. So what particular about magic? That's actually a good point, because I want to talk about what spiritual powers and how it relates to magic, actually. But another? Yes?
The power to know your past lives.
Power to know your past lives. And not just your own past lives, also other people's past lives. So that's one for sure. Seeing through walls. Okay, you could say that one, but that one I would say part of the complete spiritual power. So that's actually just all grouped into one power. But
Yeah, that's
okay.
X-ray vision.
X-ray vision. Superman. Knowing others' thoughts. It's mind reader. Okay, 3 so far. Hear everything. So we sometimes call it the celestial ear or the divine ear. So you can hear into the heavens, hear what's happening in the hells, hear in all directions. That's 4. Another one. Hint, another organ, another sense organ. Heavenly eye, yeah, the heavenly eye. So you can also see into the heavens and see into the hells. They said that one's actually kind of scary. If you can see always in the hells, it's not that pleasant. So we want to be careful if we have that ability. We want to. And there's one more. And this is I would say the most important spiritual power in the Buddhist cultivation. Do people know what that is? Lo Jing Tong. Do people know the English for that? No outflows. No outflows. Okay, so that's the 6th spiritual power. And the reason, and they say that actually that spiritual power comes from particularly Buddhist cultivation. In the other 5 that we just listed, in other, you could say, spiritual practitioners, they can attain those spiritual abilities. But the last one comes from Buddhist practice. And what's associated with it is you're free of greed, hatred, and delusion. That's the reason. And you're free of birth and death. That's what an arhat realizes, is basically he's free of outflows. And that's the mark of a sage. So a sage is somebody who has the no outflows. So that, for Buddhists, and what we're cultivating, is the most important. The other 5 are kind of like nice to have. But for a bodhisattva, it's a must. Because here he says he displays great spiritual powers because he wants to teach living beings. But in terms of our cultivation, the focus is on really reducing our greed, hatred, and delusion. And if we really can free ourselves from that, that's really, I would say, probably the most important spiritual ability. Okay, so what I wanted to talk about, though, was the principle behind spiritual abilities or spiritual powers. Because one of the laymen here just mentioned is magic. And I actually want to say, this is actually a really important concept when I first came to Buddhism, that I learned that actually spiritual powers isn't quite magic. Because in the West, we think of spiritual powers, sometimes we translate it as supernatural powers, is because we see it, say, in the Judeo-Christian or the Western mindset, these abilities are not natural. They're like a miracle. They're like magic, and something that doesn't happen normally. But rather, in Buddhism, what it sees it as is these are actually very, very normal. These are very normal abilities. It's just that we've lost them because we've covered over ourselves with confusion. So these abilities aren't able to function. Last night when we were discussing it, Jin-He Sure gave a very good, I think, analogy that just shows how mundane they are. It's like if you were with a friend and maybe you had walkie-talkies and he's at the top of the mountain and you're at the bottom of the mountain and he says, "Oh, look, out there, there's this weather pattern coming in. There's these clouds coming in. I guess you can see the sky. So maybe you could say, somebody's coming. Somebody's coming from far away, and they can see because they're on the mountain. And then you're down on the bottom, and you're listening, and you say, I don't see anything. Nothing's going on. And then later the person appears, and you go, wow, he's amazing. How does he know this person's going to appear? But obviously, of course, he's on the mountain. He sees farther than we do. And so for us, or for somebody who doesn't have their abilities open, who haven't, say, walked the path up the mountain, they think they're really amazing. But in fact, all it is just a very natural process of cultivation. It's not something we seek. It's not something we run after. And that's also really important, because this is something where we can go astray in Buddhism or in spiritual practice, as people see these things and we use our greedy mind and they fixate on them and say, oh, we want to get these powers. And maybe use the same analogy. It would be like, somehow forcing yourself to like jump really high in the air or something, or you get some bird picks you up and allows you to see further, but in the end, you might get dropped. You might fall down. And so in Buddhism, the idea is you're just naturally cultivating yourself, and these things will naturally occur. So I think there's 2 principles that's really important regarding this, and why we teach about it is because one is you don't seek after it, you don't want them. The other one is you aren't afraid of them. Actually, that was more my response, was when I read about these, since they're so far away from my daily experience, I was kind of like, I don't like this whole part of the teachings. They're kind of foreign to me. But even that kind of mind of kind of rejecting and being afraid of them, I think isn't really wholesome. Because I actually have met people who had not really great spiritual abilities, but some kind of weird phenomenon happens to them they can't explain. Like I remember one young man came for a meditation session in the City of 10,000 Buddhas, and he said, he was meditating, and all of a sudden his cup in front of him moved. There's like nothing's going on. He was so scared he stopped meditating for like years. And now he's back at the City of 10,000 Buddhas and maybe starting to meditate a little bit again. And it was just so far out for him that he got so scared he stopped cultivating. And so what I mean was that, I don't know what exactly happened, but for us, if we're cultivating, strange things, quote unquote, will happen. But the idea is, we don't let our minds move. We don't get afraid of it. It's just like, oh, okay, so this is just something happened. And so what I see is that's the principle between spiritual powers, and not to get lost in the idea that it's a magic or a thing that is beyond normal, what's beyond our normal what we actually have inherent within us. Otherwise, the mind moves to kind of a greediness. And so what you'll see in the sutra, it just becomes very mundane, very, very normal. May I invite Jin-He, you want to add or tell your story?
Yeah, so basically for Buddhist practitioners, you don't practice or cultivate to get spiritual powers. You get it as you purify your own mind, as you remove the covers of ignorance. It's just like, I saw an ad when I was a student in Australia, and it was an ad against drink driving. What is it? Drunk driving.
Drunk driving.
It's been a while since I had a drink. So what happened is that the television showed a view of a road, and in the background you hear someone drinking, and then pump, a beer glass, an empty beer glass, gets put in front of the road and the camera, and because all the beer glass has just been emptied, you see all this foam running off the sides of the beer glass, and then continuously in the background you hear the sound, and then pop, a second mug comes. So this is the camera, this is the road, one mug, second mug. By the time the third mug comes down, you can't see the road anymore because it's been obscured by the mugs. So the reason I said that, it was a really good ad. It really drove home the point. But in terms of principle, I would use that ad. The beer mugs signify our ignorance. So the more ignorance we remove from ourselves as we purify our minds, as we bring our minds still, and the clearer things become to us. And you could say that as things become clearer and clearer, that's where spiritual penetrations arise. So for the practitioner, if you do it the right way and you obtain spiritual penetrations, it is a very normal, it's in you already. It's just like eyesight. You already have the eyesight within you. You're just removing the covers of ignorance.
Just to add, so that's the first part of this, but the second part of the sentence says, to teach and transform living beings. So for the Bodhisattva, though, the ability to have spiritual powers is actually very important. And why? Because he's using it to teach and transform living beings. He's not using it at all for selfish motivations. So oftentimes, if we look at, the popular fantasy novels or probably Harry Potter and other things, although maybe sometimes he's altruistic, there's a sense that spiritual powers are used to kind of make yourself a little bit more powerful, a little bit more wonderful. That's not at all the spiritual powers in Buddhism. They're only there to help other people. If somebody's using it to feel like they have some special abilities. Actually, it's really interesting, if you look at the biographies of the great masters of Buddhism, like for instance, Venerable Master Empty Cloud, right? I think he's somebody people feels has great spiritual abilities, but when people came to, the communists came to beat him up at one of the monastery called Yunmen incident, he didn't use any of his spiritual abilities. He took the beating, almost died, and then later he brought himself back from pretty much being beaten to death. And he didn't use his spiritual powers and smited the people or do something to fight back. He was very much, it's the spiritual abilities aren't there to bolster yourself. And so that's the spirit of the Bodhisattva. And so therefore, in that regard, spiritual abilities is extremely important, because if you're able to see, say, someone's past lives, then when you're teaching them, you can be more effective. If you can know the person's thoughts, well, you can be more effective to help teach them. We have a couple of stories around these things. And I think what I just said a moment ago about us not wanting to, quote unquote, say have the heavenly eye, because maybe it's kind of scary to see into the hells. But for the Bodhisattva, they need to see into hells because they're trying to save the beings in the hells. Their samadhi and their ability to have their mind unmoving and clear can go to those places. But if we seek after those abilities, and we say get an ability from seeking, we're not spiritually ready for it. Our precepts aren't solid. Our character isn't solid. Our own ability to hold our mind at a stable level isn't solid. And so we can easily go astray. So, okay.
So now we come to the fun part, the story. So this story comes from the Jataka. The Jataka is a collection of stories that the Buddha would tell of his own experiences, his own past lives in order to teach people. So all the stories that the Buddha told in his 40 plus years when he was on earth were all compiled into a special compilation called the Jataka. I think there are about 500 over stories, or close to 600 in the Jataka, and they're full of these amazing stories. So one day the Buddha was walking along and he saw, in the story it doesn't quite define if the person he was speaking to was a monk or a man, but the Buddha referred to him as brother, which could mean a monk, a fellow monk. So this monk was, how would I put it, lovesick. He was remembering his former wife and he missed her. So the Buddha said, "Come, let me tell you a story." He said, long ago, once upon a time, there was a king, and the king's name was Asaka, and he was the king of a town called Potali. He had this queen called Ubari, and this queen was his, how would I put it, because he was kings at the time. This had happened a long time ago, we don't know when. The story starts with once upon a time, like a really great story, once upon a time. And because he was his queen, of all his consorts, she was really, really beautiful. But this queen died. And for 7 days, 7 nights, the king could not perform any of his duties. He just lay in bed crying because he missed his wife very much. She was really graceful, she was really beautiful. However, she was also really vain. And she did not do, as a queen, you have the ability to do a lot of meritorious deeds if you want to. But she did not do anything like that. She was just really self-centered. Not evil or anything, she was just really self-centered. So at this time, the Bodhisattva was he was kind of like a rishi, which is an Indian word for an ascetic practitioner who has spiritual penetrations.
To say, when he said Bodhisattva, that means the Buddha in his previous life. So the Buddha, before he becomes the Buddha, all those Jataka tales, they call him the Bodhisattva because he's still on the path to becoming a Buddha. So the Bodhisattva is the Buddha in the previous life. Yeah.
Okay, so in this previous life of his, he was called a rishi. So apparently he lived in the Himalayas. That's what the story said, so that people can have a reference to where he lived in the mountains. So my idea of the story, he must have been sitting in meditation, and he came out maybe to look at the sun, he stretched, and then he used his spiritual penetrations to see what was going on in the country. And he said, "Oh, so what's that king doing?" So he said, "That king needs some help, and I'll see if I can help him." So he flew from the mountains. I'm not sure how he flew. Maybe he just stood there and he flew, or he flew like Superman. Flew in full lotus. And he appeared at the palace. And at the palace, there was a young boy who was a servant to the king. And when the boy saw the rishi, he recognized him for who he is. And he said, "Oh, dear sir, my king is undergoing some issues. Are you able to help him? With your wisdom, I'm sure that you can." And the rishi said, "Well, I do not know your king. Is he a just king?" And the boy replied, "Yes, he is a very fair king. Would you please help him?" And the rishi told the boy, "Okay, go tell your king that I'm able to tell him where his wife has been reborn. And if that helps, if he's interested, he can come and see me right now." So the boy ran to the king and said, King, there's a rishi outside. And he has these amazing powers, and he says that he knows where Queen Ubari is right now. Would you like to see him?" Definitely, the king said, "Yes, of course I would like to see him." The king came out, and he said, "Are you sure you can tell me where my queen is?" He said, "Yes, I can." He said, "Don't test me, I'm a king." He said, No, sire, I will not test you." He said, "How can you do that?" He said, "Well, I have the ability to see what happened to Queen Ubari, and I can tell you that she was actually reborn here in this garden, in your palace." He said, I said, "Oh?" And then he uses his supernatural powers to call forth the queen. He said, "Queen Ubari, come forth." And then the king was just waiting. And he said, "There's no one here." And he said, "Sire, look on the ground." So he looked on the ground, and there's a dung beetle. 2 dung beetles, in fact. and one of them was Queen Ubari. And the king looked up at the rishi and said, "Is this a joke?" He said, "No, this is not a joke." He said, "Give me a moment and I'll make her speak." So he used his ability to transfer the dung beetle's thoughts into a human voice, back into her own Queen Ubari's voice. And he said, "Dung beetle, speak, tell me who you are and who you were." And she said, well, in her old human voice, said, "Well, I used to be the chief queen of King, what's his name again? King Asaka." And at this point, the king was on the ground. What's going on? And yeah, that's how the story was told. And she said, "I was the queen, and this whole place belonged to me. This whole palace, this whole garden." And then the rishi asked her, he said, "Who is that dung beetle next to you?" He said, "Oh, this is my new husband." Right? It's a very dramatic story. And you can imagine the king like. Then the rishi asked her, "Who do you love more now? Do you still love the great king, whose very land you're on belongs to him, or do you love your new husband?" He said, "Well, having been reborn and confused by birth and death, what is my old king, my old husband to me now, compared to my new beloved?" He said, "Why? If I had the opportunity, I wouldn't mind killing my old husband and smearing the blood as an offering on my new husband's feet." That's what she said. And the king woke up by hearing that. And he realized that his affections for his queen, although were very strong, were for someone who after rebirth had forgotten and had a new life. So it is said in the story that then he stood up, he washed his head, and he went on with his life. And he took a new queen. And the rishi flew away. So that's that story. Yeah.
Okay. I'll tell another quick story about, this one's more to our world, because I've heard a lot of stories about Venerable Master Hua, and I think people feel like he has somebody with spiritual abilities. So I'm just going to tell one story, and people can see what they think about it. I heard this one firsthand, and this one was actually in the very early days of Gold Mountain Monastery, and this was a early Western disciple. And so he tells a story as, people know that for our tradition, we don't. He was a monk. Yeah, still a monk. Yes, still a monk. You can give away a number of people, and there's not that many people. There's but basically he was in the dining. He was one of these celebration days, maybe like the Buddha's birthday, right? And he was cleaning up afterwards, and washing the dishes, and people know these special celebration days, like really good cooking, a lot of very nice food, and just like on a Berkeley Monastery, there's a lot of food. And so afterwards, he's cleaning up all the dishes afterwards, and he looks around, and he sees in the garbage can, there's I forgot to say, so the tradition is we don't eat past noon. After 12 p.m., we basically refrain from eating. So he's, so everybody's generally keeping that. So he's in the washing the dishes, and then he looks, and he sees on the garbage can, there's a very nice cake. It's like one of his favorite cakes. It's, it's very well cooked, and it's not touched at all. He just threw it away, but it's just on this plate, completely fine. He's looking at it, and he goes, "Well, the food's gonna go to waste. It's just in the garbage can. It's maybe already maybe 1 o'clock already."
I think the version I heard is that he was so busy washing the dishes that he didn't have time to eat lunch.
No, but he had lunch.
He had lunch?
Yeah, for sure, he had lunch. Yeah, and so he went, and so he was washing dishes, and of course, so then he thought, okay, so he looked left, he looked right, he looked all around. He was the only one there. So he quickly took it, ate it. It's okay. Finished the dishes and walked out back into so basically there was the building was just separated by a wall One side was the dining hall, the other side was the Buddha hall where the lectures took place. So he went into the lecture where everybody was listening to the Master Hua giving a lecture. And so Master Hua was giving a lecture, and at the end of the lecture he said, you know, people think here it's pretty difficult. You know, we have to eat 1 meal a day and it's got a lot of suffering. But don't worry, if you ever find it's too difficult, you can always find good food in the garbage can. He was like, what?
I think the Brahma Master was a bit more specific, right? He mentioned cake. And
Yeah, maybe a cake, but pretty much, basically, you can always find a cake in the garbage can. Right? And so he was like, and so he actually got very, very scared. And so he ran into his room and wouldn't come out. And then so the master later went into his room, knocked on his door. And he said, oh, you're going to come out? He says, I don't know. I don't know. He says, oh, what's wrong? He says, yeah, I think you can read my mind. He says, really? And he said, and Raj said, so what color is your mind? Is your mind red? Is it blue? He's like, I don't know. He said, oh, okay. And then he left, and he thought about red. And it kind of took his mind to another place that he snapped out of his kind of his feeling of, being afraid of the master knowing what he was thinking. So that was just one kind of fun story of his, and he shared it. So, but I think this principle is that you have these abilities. You can use it to teach. For him, this story is being able to teach his disciple, some lessons. And I think for a lot of the early disciples around Master Hua, those were things that they experienced very often. Was basically where they were being taught by things that they sometimes didn't 100% understand, but they were being taught, and only taught. They saw him use these abilities only for the benefit of other people, not ever for himself. So I think that's really important, because otherwise people can, at least for me, when I first started hearing these stories, because I grew up here in America, where we don't really have stories of spiritual abilities being kind of like real people doing it. It's kind of like in the movies or Superman or something. It was a little bit like, I don't know if I can accept that. But when you contextualize it's only done from real solid virtue, completely selflessly, then that's the principle behind it. So, yeah, okay. So we're going to talk a little bit maybe more about these things later, but we have a lot to go over with the various skills. So that's the first principle. I want people, to just each lecture, we want to try to memorize one list, right? So that we can remember the 6 spiritual powers. I think one easy way to remember is there's 2 connected with the sense organs, the eye and the ear, which are our primary organs, right? Ear and seeing, those are our primary things we do. And then the other 2 have a connection with our mind, which is seeing people's thoughts, or being able to read thoughts. And then the other is seeing past lives, this ability of the mind. And then the other one is a kind of a complete spiritual mastery, like the Superman abilities, flying in the air, seeing through things, or walking through walls, or walking on water, and having all these spiritual transformations. And then the last one, which is no outflows. So 6. It's not too hard to remember, right? 2, if you can get 2, 2, 2, it's not too bad. So maybe next week, we're not lecturing next week, but you can see if you remember it next week. Okay. So we can look at the next line. You have anything else for that?
No.
Okay. He uses all kinds of expedient practice to teach and transform living beings. Since we're going to go over this later, we won't go into great depth. But basically, expedient practices, or you say skill and means, is the Bodhisattva uses many skillful methods to teach living beings. And so all the list on the bottom is basically his skillful list of things, a small subset of the things that he can do. Okay, we'll keep reading. Disciples of the Buddha, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva, is able to be that diligent in expediently teaching and transforming living beings. His resolve constantly continues as he tends towards the Buddha's wisdom. In all the good roots he creates, there is no turning back. He always diligently practices and learns the Dharma of the most supreme practices. So again here, it's still kind of a reiteration of what happened before about the expedient devices he uses. And then kind of the new concept here is that he constantly continues as he tends towards the Buddha's wisdom. Actually in the Chinese, it's Xing Heng Shi. It's basically without break, constantly, his mind is on this path. So in our cultivation, if people were just doing Chan, or maybe if you're exposed to any of the other teachings, the great teachers always emphasize, try to cultivate, have your mind always on your meditation topic, always on your recitation. You're always mindful, never a break. So here the Bodhisattva is just always on the path, moment by moment, thought by thought, never letting it just kind of slip. And he does not retreat. So he says here, he cultivates good roots, but he doesn't turn back. So it's not like he starts a little bit and then retreats. He just continues, moves forward with vigor. And finally, he diligently practices and learns the dharmas of the most supreme practices. And so here, the most supreme practices are what? Are the practices that lead us to Buddhahood. Those are the most supreme, for sure. Okay. Thanks.
So if you go on to the next part of page 47. No, I just wanted to say something before we read. So, to what extent does the Bodhisattva go in his quest to gather in living beings? So this part right now, it goes into great detail about the skills that the Bodhisattva learns so that he can be of benefit to living beings. And I think we'll just read the English together. Do you want to read
Chinese together?
Okay, all right.
So how about we read the Chinese together to be a little bit quicker? Okay. 佛子持菩萨摩诃萨为利益众生故，世间记忆密不盖习，所谓文字、算术、图书、音习、地、水、火、风种种诸论，先说通达，有善放药，了知诸病，癫狂、干消、鬼魅、孤独，悉能出断，文笔、赞咏、歌舞、伎乐、戏笑、谈说，悉善其事，国城、村邑、公宅、园院、泉流、皮池、草树、华药，翻所不列，先得其意，金银、摩尼、珍珠、琉璃、罗贝、碧玉、珊瑚等藏，悉知其处，出于世人。日月星宿，鸟鸣地震，夜梦吉凶，身相修旧，先参观察。Next page. 一无错谬，十界如禅，神通无量，事无色等，及于一切世间之事，但与众生生不为孙恼，为利益故贤习开示，见令安住无上佛法。
Okay, now let's go to the English. In second paragraph of page 47, disciples of the Buddha, there are no worldly talents or skills which this Bodhisattva Mahasattva fails to cover or practice in order to benefit living beings. That is to say, writing and computation, documentation, seals and signets, the various treatises on earth, water, fire and wind are all mastered by him. He is also skilled at prescribing medicines to cure the many ailments. He can expel the causes of lunacy and madness, emaciation, possession by ghosts and fiends, and voodoo poisons. He is good at calligraphy, hymns of praise, music for song and dance, humor and conversation. Whenever countries, cities, towns, villages, palaces, houses, parks and gardens, fountains and pools, plants, trees, flowers and herbs are arranged by him, they are all as they ought to be. He knows the locations of mines of gold, silver, money, pearls, lapis lazuli, shells, jade, coral and so forth, and points them out for people. He well contemplates and is never wrong in his pronouncements concerning the sun, moon, stars and constellations, cries of birds and quakings of the earth, lucky or inauspicious dreams, and fortunate or ill-fated bodily marks. Page 49. His holding precepts, entering dhyana, spiritual penetrations, the unlimited minds, four formless attainments, and so forth, along with all the other worldly talents, are only for the benefit of living beings, and not to harm or trouble them. He only reveals them all to gradually establish beings securely in the unsurpassed Buddha Dharma. So before you turn the page back to 48, if you just look at 49, so the key to all this text is this. All that he's doing, he's holding the precepts, he's entering the dhyana, he's displaying all his cool spiritual powers, are only for the benefit of living beings. Okay, he only does this to help people, not to show off, not to be cool, or not to earn a living or to ask for money. Okay, so that's a very important principle. Now we can go back to page 47. All right, so what's the first thing that he does? Writing and computation. Well, there were no computers back in the Buddha's time. So one of the things we need to understand is, why does he do all this? Okay, why would he want to master things like writing? Wouldn't a bodhisattva, if he wants to attract people towards the Dharma, only concentrate on the Dharma? That was my question when I first started reading a long time ago. Well, these are all tools because the bodhisattva, just, how would I say, you can't just go and speak Dharma to people who are not ready. And everyone, my own dad, when he was alive, he wasn't ready for the Dharma. So the Dharma is not something that you can just tell people about and that they will believe. You have to use expedient ways. So you have to be someone who, say, they look up to, or someone they trust, or someone who has something in common with them. So that's where when we started today's lecture, that's where the 4 kinds of gathering in comes in. So the Bodhisattva is really smart. He's a master in psychology. He doesn't go direct to the point, but he uses ways to bring you on his side, so that when the time comes, he can help you out. And he does this, like, say, through writing. So although all these are just, how would I say, worldly dharmas, they're really useful, because if you use them skillfully, and we have a treat, we have a song that will come to when it's time, you play a song, and we can see how that turns out. So writing and computation. Writing, if you are good at writing, you can inspire people through words. And you can, if you're good at writing, you can bring the principles of the Dharma in ways that do not seem to be the Dharma. It's just common sense. Like, what is karma? There's a saying, what goes around comes around. Or treat your neighbors as, how does it go again? Treat your neighbors as you want to be treated. Treat people as you want them to treat you. Something like that. There's so many of these sayings going around. So these are just, basically the Dhamma is just principle.
I think just love your neighbor as yourself.
Love your neighbor as yourself.
I think that's how it goes.
Yeah.
Do unto others as others do unto you.
Yeah.
Do unto others as others. The golden rule. Do unto others as you want done to you.
And you find that in all the religions. So basically, the Bodhisattva, he knows how to get people on their side by giving them things that they can accept. So you start a bit. Some people, they can accept more, so you tell them more. Some people can accept less, you tell them less. Some people inclination are towards something else, so you use that to get them over on your side. So writing and computation, documentation. Documentation could be interpreted as, say, someone who understands legal language really well. So if, say, you want buying,
Yeah, I was also going to ask something after that.
Okay, so say if you're buying a house, and you need someone to help you understand the purchase agreement. The Bodhisattva, if he understands this, then he will try to help you. If he spots something wrong, he say, maybe you might want to change this, because when you want to sell the house or you want to buy the house, you might get into a bit of trouble.
I was going to say, is tu su in Chinese, is that like drawing, design? A little bit drawing, tu hua, or not? Compound? So it's documented, but it could be also drawing, graphic. Yeah, so maybe also you can add in their drawing and graphics. So those are who are designers, interior design, graphic artists, maybe in there.
The various treatises on earth, water, fire, and wind. So he could be a master in understanding weather patterns, in understanding, say, geology. But all this doesn't mean that he practices this as a living, although he might. You never know. But it's just that when he has a chance, say if you want to buy, say if we come back to the house and you want to buy a house near a shore, he understands that houses by the shore are at higher risk. Or he can see and understand that if you buy a house here in maybe 15 years' time, the chances of a storm coming and washing a house away are very high. So he would advise you, say, maybe not here, would you consider something further in? Or if you want to buy a house near a volcano, there are a lot of people living near volcanoes. In Philippines, for example, there are a lot of people living near shores. And everyone knows these are really dangerous places, but no one listens. Why? Paradise. Yes, there are slices of paradise. They want to be by the beach. But a lot of money is being spent to help these people when disasters happen or when the shoreline starts eroding. Anyway, so the Bodhisattva, whenever he has a chance, and he knows that you are someone who will listen to him because he's creating all this, he has created or he's trying to create favorable conditions, then he uses that opportunity to help you, to save you from suffering in your future.
So next two we're going to take together because I think we've got an interesting story to kind of show those two. He's also skilled at prescribing medicines to cure the many ailments. He can expel the causes of lunacy and madness, emaciation, possession by ghosts and fiends, and voodoo poisons. So I think people can naturally think about, well, of course, doctors have a natural ability to, once they're respected, they have a skill to help living beings so that people will feel, if they heal somebody, there's definitely a natural tendency to say, well, I trust this person, he wants to help me out. So that's very natural. But what I wanted to talk about was the next one, which is the lunacy and madness, emaciation, possession by ghosts and fiends, and voodoo poisons. Because for myself, growing up in America, that's not usually how I see, medicine is, basically it's exorcism, right? It's exorcism, like, whoa, exorcism. Voodoo poison, okay. It's actually that's what I want to make an analogy, because actually in Malaysia, it's very different. And so, because I remember, and Jin-He can correct me whenever I get it wrong, because I had a friend in college, and we were extremely different in background. I mean, she was from Malaysia, more of a rural part of Malaysia, and I grew up here in America. And so we resonated with very different parts of Buddhism, like the spiritual things and the Pure Land, all those things. She couldn't make immediately sense with. I had a lot of difficulty understanding. And so one way that I found interesting just to express our difference in background was actually around medicine. So she said, okay, let me explain to you what happened. Say my brother gets sick. What happened, and she described, was I would go, and we, family, go to this local temple, and there'd be this multicolored rainbow chair in the temple, and then this person would sit on the chair, and some spirit would enter into their body, and they'd go, and then they'd speak, and then they'd give some kind of potion, this kind of prescription, for my brother who's sick, and take it, and then we'd take it home, we'd make the potion, we'd take it, and he'd get better. And that was their medicine. I was like, wow. That's quite different than my experience. My experience in America is, well, we go to the doctor, he wears a nice white suit, he takes my pulse, he maybe looks at my takes my temperature, says, you have this symptom, okay, so he probably has a lot of medical knowledge, and so he says, okay, well, you have this, so what you're going to prescribe to you is this, prescription. You go to the pharmacy, you give your prescription, the pharmacy gives you this nice little pellets of colorful medicine, you take it and you get better. So our two experiences of medicine was extremely different, and I think that's interesting because it shows the differences of culture and living beings that are learning the Dharma, and also is what the Bodhisattva is teaching. So why would he have this ability to expel lunacy and madness? In the West, we don't usually associate madness with actually ghosts and spirits. But in Asia, they say somebody who's gone kind of crazy actually might have a ghost or a spirit kind of, doing something. And so having abilities to quote unquote exorcise these kind of spirits is something that would be seen as a very valuable skill. Or there's also probably, I hear a lot of stories in Malaysia, there's a lot of voodoo hexes. So I don't know if Jin-He wants to share anything about it, but he was explaining he's correcting my stories. Oh yeah, actually, that's not exactly how all of them are like. They're more like this usually. It actually makes a lot of sense. Let me explain to you why we do this. I'm like, oh wow, so.
Well, in many cultures around the world, South America, in Southeast Asia, things like possession or spirits or ghosts or voodoo or hexes is a really normal thing. It's part of life because it has been a part of culture for thousands of years. Like what Jin-Chuan just mentioned about that kind of healing is really ingrained in Taoist culture, for example. I have a personal story that of a family that I knew when I was young. But before I get to that, say like voodoo poisons or hexes, the whole Shurangama Sutra, if you're familiar with that, was spoken because Venerable Ananda, which was the attendant of the Buddha, was put under a spell. So even during the Buddha's time, all this was seen as being really normal. But we can understand how someone who comes from a culture that does not have this background can see all this can easily dismiss that this is just superstition. But for a lot of people out there, these things actually are a part of their daily lives. So when I was growing up, I was about maybe 5 years old. My mom had this really good friend who was someone from Thailand, and she had married, her husband was a British. And I believe they were neighbors. I only remember her hugging me. She was very big, and every time she saw me, she would like give me a great hug and a kiss. And one of the stories that I heard about this person was that she would have 2 little baby spirits that she took care of to guard the house for her. And she even showed my mom, I'm not sure what, it was like a little dollhouse. And the husband was really freaked out by all this. The husband was being a British national. At night he would hear sounds in the house, and he would hear sounds of children playing. But because he believed in what he believed that his wife knew what she was doing, he left her alone. So the wife's rationale for this is that these spirits help protect the home. So one day they were out and someone broke into their house. And when they came back, they called the police. And the police went into the home and found the robber just sitting on the ground. And the police asked him, why are you just sitting there? Why didn't you try? You got in. Why didn't you get out? He said, well, when I got in, suddenly I just couldn't find my way out. Everything was like a maze, and I tried to escape, but nothing worked. I couldn't find the door. Yeah. And when she started becoming pregnant, when she became pregnant, sorry, you can't start becoming. When she became pregnant, then she gave away the 2 little spirits to. So that's my personal experience about something like voodoo or ghosts.
Okay, so in this case, the Bodhisattva has those abilities and uses it to benefit living beings.
Yeah, but we also can interpret this in a modern way. There are a lot of mental afflictions that people undergo through now, and they have to go on medication to cope with mental stress right now. So you could read this sentence to mean, say, things like depression, schizophrenia. How do you?
Okay, I lost my schizophrenia. Yeah.
Yeah. So this can be to describe any modern ailment that science can't really treat right now. Yeah.
Okay. Want to keep going? So we go. The next one is he's good at calligraphy. hymns of praise, music for song and dance, humor and conversation. That's a very nice list.
And coming to music for song, let me ask our IT chief, Yan Lin. Just 1 minute. Okay, so let us know when you're ready. We'll just explain. Everyone knows what calligraphy is.
You see some, yeah, you see it around us. There's, in the Chinese tradition, calligraphy is extremely important. A lot of, especially for Chan or Zen monasteries, it's definitely a mark of a cultivated person, and you can see the person's spirit and kind of cultivation in their writing, in their calligraphy. And so there's one really well-known Vinaya master named Hong Dashi, and he's actually a modern monk. I won't tell his story. He's a long, very fun, interesting story about him. But he was really good at calligraphy to the point that he actually created his own calligraphy styles. You know, ones you can master calligraphy, but he actually has calligraphy styles that he created. He's a modern Vinaya Buddhist master. So.
Back before the printing press was invented, Bibles were drawn by hand, and they were really nice and intricate. So when you approach a Bible and you open it up, you were just taken in by the awe, and that helped you. How would I say? There's a presence to the Bible that help you be more respectful, and there's a lot of spirituality in that. Just even before you start reading it, it comes across in the calligraphy. Hymns of praise, that's one of the 10 practices of Samantabhadra Bodhisattva, and what we do at the monastery every day. Music for song, let me check. Okay, maybe we can distribute the songbook. Feather, would you like to help? And maybe Angela, grab some songbooks. We thought this would be a good time to experience for ourselves how music can help, say, in cultivation. And the title of this song is, I think most of you would be familiar. It's She Carries Me. And we have a recording of Reverend Heng Sure, who's in Australia right now. But from one of his previous lectures, he actually played this music. So this is a really good we thought that this is a really good time to see how someone skillful at writing and composing can use music as a tool to move the heart.
Maybe to give a little bit more background as the songbooks are coming through. So She Carries Me is on about Guanyin Bodhisattva, the Bodhisattva of great compassion. And I think if you read the lyrics, they're actually very meaningful because they capture the spirit of Guanyin Bodhisattva. And it's actually in English, so there's not too many English praises that I think really capture the spirit. Do you know what page it's on? 20? Page 20.
Page 20.
Page 20.
And finally, humor and conversation. Humor and conversation. Well, that's really obvious. I've spoken to some people who don't have any humor and who are really bad at conversation. So having humor and conversation is a really good way to engage people and make it more interesting around what you have to say.
Just to add something there. Actually, I feel a little bit bad for English speakers who can't understand Chinese because I've recently been listening to the Master Hua's talks. They're just in Chinese because they have all the tape lectures and his Dharma talks. And I listened to his language and he's speaking, and he's actually extremely humorous. When you listen to him talk and he tells stories, like Jin-He told that story about the dung beetle, like, you know, a little bit of dramatism, but Venerable Master does a huge amount of dramatism when he speaks his stories. It's like a whole nother level. And
thank you very much.
And the thing is, though, what I felt bad is that it doesn't come through so much in the English. But what it says is that you can hear the ability of humor and conversation in that.
Are you trying your humor out on me? Are you ready? Okay, everyone has page 20. Okay, feel free to sing along, all right?
Remember how it goes? She carries me. It's Guanyin Bodhisattva song. She is a boat. She is a light. Is it in the book? High on a hill. What page? In the dark of night. Page 20. She is awake. She is a deep. She is the dark where the angels sleep on Northern Hill, where peace abides. She carries me to the other side. Here we go. She carries me. She carries me. She carries me to the other side. She carries me. She carries me. She carries me to the other side. And though I walk through valleys deep and shadows chase me in my sleep, on rocky cliffs I stand alone. I have no name, I have no hope. With broken wings I long to fly. She carries me to the other side. She carries me. She carries me. She carries me to the other side. She carries me. She carries me. She carries me to the other side. 1,000 arms, 1,000 eyes, 1,000 ears to hear my cries. She is the gate, she is the door, she leads me through and back once more. When day has dawned, when death is nigh, she carries me to the other side. She carries me, she carries me, she carries me to the other side. She carries me, she carries me, she carries me to the other side.
There you go.
Another song.
Music for song.
Yeah. Okay, so you can see that's very effective. The next one is whenever countries, cities, towns, villages, palaces, houses, parks and gardens, fountains and pools, plants, trees, flowers and herbs are arranged by him, they're all as they ought to be. So we have the flower arrangements here. We have wonderful flower arrangements above us and around us. You can see in the Buddha Hall. They're definitely works of art. And I just was here maybe 2 weeks ago, Thursday. James Baraz, a Spirit Rock group, comes. And one of the people at the end, when I was cleaning up, was like, wow, these flowers. I mean, whoa, wow, you guys really put a lot of care into the offerings. I'm like, yeah, people really put a good job into it. So you can see it inspires people to see really well done flower arrangements, or when things are just as they ought to be. For people who maybe are town planners, or I know we have a traffic engineer here. We have people who do, architecture. Being in a city of 10,000 Buddhas, I had opportunities to help out a bit with buildings and grounds. And there's a lot of work that goes into trying to maintain a big monastery or a compound like that. And so figuring out where things ought to be and how to do that is very important, especially if you're trying to help people cultivate. And so it makes a big difference.
Yeah, the Bodhisattva here is trying to make life more comfortable for people, more pleasant, more comfortable, less traffic jams, more parks.
And also, I think more opportunities to create, to have this resolve to cultivate. And this is a reflection for ourselves. You can actually think about it, but how we set up physical space definitely has an influence on our mind and our thoughts to cultivate. So when you come to the monastery, you can see just how things are laid out and how things are arranged. It inspires maybe somebody to cultivate. Especially coming to the Buddha hall, it's like, wow. You see the stained glass windows, you go, wow.
High ceiling, wow.
Yeah. Okay. Next one is, he knows locations of mines of gold, silver, many pearls, lapis lazuli, shells, jade, coral, and so forth, and points them out for people. He doesn't say that he goes to those mines and takes all the treasures for himself. He says, oh, look over there. And they go, oh, wow. And they find, a huge treasure trove. And obviously, when you do that, you're probably very happy and you have good, favorable feelings toward the person who showed you where these treasures were. If you think about it, maybe in our own minds as well, you could say the treasures in our own mind. He points out where we have wisdom in our own mind, where we have compassion in our own hearts. And he can show us where they are, and we find them. Oh, wow. So the treasures don't have to just be outside. The treasures can be inside too. So.
And the next one, he well contemplates and is never wrong in his pronouncements concerning the sun, moon, stars and constellations, cries of birds and quakings of the earth, lucky or inauspicious dreams, and fortunate or ill-fated bodily marks. So what's this? Astrology, physiognomy, geomancy, what else? Cries of birds and quakings of the earth. How would this have helped people? Well, if you're good at astrology, you can tell people when to plant things. If you can foretell how weather patterns can be like, you can advise farmers, which is a really big deal, because during that time, if you are able to plant enough food, you can survive. You ensure the survival of people, or whether they go through hardship. You can advise them that next year might be a bad year, so store up your grain. Don't eat too much food this year, so you can still survive next year.
I was going to say, I actually think that for certain cultures and for maybe certain types of people, this actually is a really effective Dharma door as well, because some people really pay attention to astrology and really take a lot of the advice very, very seriously about what they should do in their life, even to the point of cultivating their character. I think that's really critical, is that people go, oh wow, so that's one of my flaws because it's in my charts. I'm going to be, impatient, or I'm too, such and such. It's in my charts. So then the person, oh wow. And so you can say, well, maybe what you do is do this and it helps correct. And some people go, yeah. And so I think potentially in a way, that's one way the Bodhisattva can say teach virtue and teach precepts. Is like, oh yeah, you want to not have that ill-fated, unfortunate thing happen to you. Well, if you do this, which corrects for some of the difficulties in your charts here, you'll go the right way and not have that happen. So,
physiognomy also means being able to tell a person's character, say like through the features of his face. So imagine if you're someone who's really skillful in this, and you meet someone for the first time. So when you meet this person and you study his face, straight away you know if he's someone who's kind-hearted, someone who is, say, stubborn, or someone who's, say, very generous. And then without him knowing, you can use the skills that you know to nurture his strengths and to say learn new skills to compensate for his weaknesses or to eliminate his weaknesses, for example. So that's one way of doing this. And speaking of astrology, when I was about 15 years old in Malaysia, I was growing up, my mom was a bit worried about my future. And now I'm a monk. So she had right to worry, right? So she went to see this astrologer. He was an Indian man, and he was pretty high-tech at the time. He had this. He didn't consult like charts. He consulted a computer. So all my mom gave him was my birth date and the time I was born. And he put all this in his computer and he say, "Oh dear, madam," he was Indian, "I'm so sorry to say." Anyway, he told my mom a few things, which was pretty amazing. Like just through that information, he told my mom that, "Oh, you have 3 sons." I was like, "Yes." And he started explaining like what my dad was doing. He started explaining. He said, "Your son's personality is like this. He's very naughty right now, but he'll turn out okay. Don't worry." He said things like that. I think they all say nice things to make you feel like, oh, this is a very accurate. But he said certain things were pretty amazing. And at the time he said it, some of the things were in the past, and some of the things had not happened yet. So what are the things that he said? 2 things that were really profound, at least from how I saw it. He predicted 2 dates that I would leave the country. One was when I was about 18 years old. And at the time I was just 15. And usually 18 years old is the time where you study. But something happened in my life at that time, and I chose to work. And I did leave the country to work in a different country for 1 year. And it was only after that happened and I remembered what this fortune teller had said. And another thing he said was that in my 30s, I would sever my ties with, I think he said family and country. And when he said that, I felt that was really odd. That was a really odd thing to say. How can that happen? And in my 20s and 30s, before I had decided to be a monk, all that prediction didn't make sense at all. There was no way I would like sever. And it was only after I made the decision to become a monk, and then I remembered what this astrologer told my mom, and then it started making sense. It wasn't like severe ties, as in I don't know you anymore, but it was being a monk. Another way of how they describe it is living the home life. You leave your home behind, and a monk's life is that of a wandering ascetic, as in you don't have a fixed abode, you don't stay in one place. So I guess that's what he meant in his best way to try to understand, looking at my charts. Yeah, so that's my experience with astrology.
Okay, the next one is his holding precepts, entering dhyana, spiritual powers, the unlimited minds, the 4 formless attainments, and so forth, along with all the other worldly talents, are only for the benefit of living beings and not to harm or trouble them. So as Jin-He Sure just mentioned, that last line is very key. It's only to help people and not to cause them any harm or trouble. So that requires a lot of wisdom. It's not, so we told some stories about astrology and all various stories. And sometimes, psychics, astrology, those kind of fields aren't just for benefiting living beings. They're, as I said, sometimes just for a livelihood or for personal gain of some sort. And so that's not what the Bodhisattva is doing. He's doing it in a way that is very selfless, maybe oftentimes not even noticeable. He's helping people, with these spiritual abilities or being good at these things. That's not even noticeable. It doesn't, because he doesn't put the spotlight on himself. It's like he might be good at something, but it doesn't like show off. It's just he just is good at it, and so people just naturally turn to him. Oh, I'm listening to what that person's saying because I respect his opinion. But he's very humble about it, not showy about it, and so you can just look over him. He's not trying to put the spotlight on himself, which is sometimes different than how oftentimes, as living ordinary beings, try to cultivate these skills. We get it in order to a little bit fill out our own self a little bit, to become masters. Our
The
ego.
ego.
Yeah, kind of fill out our portfolio and get a skill like that. So that's, I think, when it goes a little bit astray. And so even when we were discussing, I thought Jin-He gave one way to make it very relevant for us, is that we take, or if you want to say it, is that, you don't remember? Okay, so he said what I thought was another key principle for this lecture was, take this section and look to yourself as anything that you're really good at, that you have a talent with, that's something you can use to benefit other people. So it doesn't mean just the Bodhisattva is great at these things. We all maybe have small talents here and there in doing certain things that we can use to maybe help people. So that's something that we can reflect on to see, oh, some of these things we might have. We might be able to, be good at humor and conversation. So rather than just using humor and conversation to just, be the life of the party, maybe how can I really use that to help people, have this resolve to realize Bodhi, to wake up and cultivate the way. So I think that's one way to use this, is not just to think about it in the sense of, oh, the Bodhisattva is doing something, is in our cultivation of things and also our skills, to use that as our mind frame. Not to use a mind frame just learning the skill for itself, but using it with this frame that we're learning it to benefit other people. Actually, that was one of the major things that Master Hua coming to this, to this country and emphasized education, Buddhist education, was he said that because our educational system has kind of gone astray. We're mostly around learning skills now. If you look into our educational system, like elementary, middle school, high school, college, a lot about is learning a skill. You learn, computers, you learn engineering, you learn science, you learn this. There's very little about really, you could say, the values behind it. It's kind of like a valueless education is what we get. So what he said, for a lot of young people now, you ask them what they want to do, is why do I want to become in this particular profession? Well, because it makes a lot of money or has a high status. So he has a really nice thing that works in Chinese. He says now people in the past, he said people were educated because they want to ming li, which means to understand principle, understand how to be a person. He says now people are getting education for ming li, which is, you can hear it's the same sounds, right? But ming li in Chinese means for fame and profit. So now the educational system is based on fame and profit, where in the past it was for understanding principle. So what we want to try to do is to go back to the root. Not to say we don't want to learn skills. Obviously, you can see the Bodhisattva is masters of all these skills, but the heart that he brings to it is because he knows how to cultivate his humanity, and then these skills naturally come forth from that. And when you have that, I think actually that is really important for our modern day times. We're young people, because we often learn these skills, but we feel this meaninglessness because we just master a skill, but we don't know what to do with it. We don't know how to ground ourselves. And the grounding is this. And the grounding doesn't come, I would say, it also doesn't come from a book. It comes from real living examples of people doing good with those skills that we can be around and absorb their energy. It's not something that comes from reading a book or even watching a YouTube video. It's kind of like something you get from real human contact, real people, real community. So that's just a thought.
Yeah, I just want to go back to the first three words of the first sentence on page 49. He's holding precepts. It's mentioned really casually in this sentence. He's holding precepts, entering dhyana. Why I want to single out precepts? Because the only reason the Bodhisattva can do all this, apart from his vows that he made to help living beings, is through holding our precepts. Because if he did not hold his precepts, he would not be where he is right now. Because precepts are part of a triage: precept, samadhi, wisdom, that encompasses all the teachings of the Buddha. All right. From holding the precepts, you get samadhi. Basically, samadhi is another way of saying concentration. And from concentration, then you get wisdom. So the Bodhisattva is here because he has held the precepts. And because his fifth ground is a ground of blazing wisdom, right? No?
Difficult conquest.
Difficult conquest, I'm sorry. Blazing wisdom was the fourth ground. Difficult conquest, meaning that he had to undergo the different dhyanas. And he only could undergo the different dhyanas, which here entering dhyana, because he held the precepts well. So precepts enable you to enter samadhi or concentration, and it is only through concentration that you obtain wisdom. And from that wisdom, how you apply that wisdom that gives you the right results. Yeah. So when you want to say something?
Just double checking. Yes, it's difficult conquest.
Ground of difficult conquest?
Yes, this is the ground of difficult conquest.
Okay. So you see the words like dhyana. There are actually 4 levels of dhyana. Dhyana are just states of concentration. So 4 levels. The first dhyana, if you want to take notes, this is another list. A bliss born of separation. The second dhyana is a bliss born of samadhi. Bliss meaning you feel really peaceful when you enter these dhyanas. And then the third dhyana is wonderful happiness or being apart from bliss. So first you enter bliss, and then when you depart from bliss, you actually enter another state at one stage of bliss called wonderful happiness. And the fourth dhyana is clear purity of casting away thought. That's where you leave thought behind, and you enter a really peaceful state.
So the spiritual powers that we've already listed, the 6 of those. The unlimited minds, you can say sometimes translated the boundless minds, and I think this is another list, but we don't have time to go into them, but it's a really good list. Another one to remember, maybe for another week. But they are loving kindness, compassion. So first one is metta. We always say metta, right? There's a metta sutta. Metta, loving kindness. Second one's karuna, compassion. Third one is sympathetic joy, which I believe is mudita. Mudita. And then the fourth one's equanimity, this evenness of mind. Upekkha. Actually, we have a family from Indonesia who's named after these. Someone's like Upekkha, one's Prajna, and Karuna. But anyways, but these I think are really, if you really think about it, they make a lot of sense. So the loving kindness, what it means is you want to give happiness to other people. You want to benefit them. You care about them. You know, the compassion is removing suffering from people. So the idea that you see somebody suffering, your heart moves to compassion. You try to help them get out of suffering. The third one is sympathetic joy, which I think is really good because it's like the antidote to jealousy, or it's like the other side of jealousy. We have this jealous mind, which I think in our hearts, when we have that feeling, it's really negative. You know, it feels horrible. It's like bile. It kind of has a sympathetic joy is the exact opposite. It's actually when people are happy, I'm happy for them, and I'm really happy that they're doing well. And to me, that makes a lot of sense. It's like, isn't that just better in general? Is that it kind of reinforces itself? It's not this negative spiral down, you know, with a kind of a jealous, competitive, you know, kind of mind. And the fourth one is equanimity, this kind of evenness of mind. You know, you're just able to be still. So those are 4 types of meditation practice as well. And they're 4 states of cultivation that it bends us in the heavens. The next one is the 4 formless attainments. I don't know if you have those or we don't. Maybe just to point them out, it's basically in the Buddhist, you can say Buddhist cosmology, there's various realms of existence, and there's 4 formless realms. So there's, for instance, a realm of boundless space, where there's neither thought nor non-thought. So these kind of names of these 4 heavens. And so this is the type of concentration. So in our lives, we can enter into meditative states that are associated with these heavens if you really cultivate your mind. And so this is what the Bodhisattva has mastered. He's able to go into these.
Yeah, just to add to what Jin-Chuan was saying about the 4 formless attainments, they are part of the 4 dhyanas, as in there's a list of 8. So if you have the first 4 dhyanas, and then after you get the stage of the 4th dhyana, the next stage would be the 4 formless attainments. And the names for these attainments, the first one is the station of boundless emptiness, which describes the state of the experience that you get when you're in this. Second one is the station of boundless consciousness. The third one is the station of nothing whatsoever. And the 4th one is neither thought nor non-thought. So these are names that describe the states you are in. Basically, these states are beyond the comprehension of someone who has not been there before. and apparently it's really difficult to describe because they go beyond words. They lie beyond the conscious mind. Yeah. It is time now to go to our PowerPoint presentation. This is the third and final series. The last 2 weeks we've been showing, I see some smiles. The last 2 weeks we've been showing the 32 major hallmarks of the Buddha. And this is the final week where we'll show hallmarks number 22, I believe, 22 to 32.
Just as a introduction, I just look at the next section of the sutra. It says that the Bodhisattva actually, through the power of his vows, comes to see many Buddhas. So this is a chance to see the Buddha's hallmarks. So. Yeah, 22. 42. So for the people who weren't here for the other two presentations, one of the things we were emphasizing about the hallmarks is that they aren't, these aren't quote unquote marks of beauty. They're not trying to be really pretty or beautiful. They're marks of virtue and from cultivation. So the way that we want to approach them isn't from a conscious mind. So wow, that's really beautiful or something. It's actually, these are things that come from a certain type of spiritual practice that the Buddha can manifest that is inspiring to practitioners. Just maybe another story was that I also find that once you cultivate and you're kind of in that space. Good take. Oh, it's up. Okay. Page number 22, right?
Yeah.
Go to number 22, please.
Yeah, it is.
It's on, okay.
22.
So it's just that there's a resonance with images that you will find when they're well done. So okay, number 22.
You will never find an image of the Buddha with his teeth showing. So the Buddha apparently has 40 teeth. They're all really white. They're even, no gaps, and they're close to one another. And the cause is, there are numerous causes because there are numerous manifestations. 40 teeth is due to his having rid himself of divisive language and having always worked for unity and harmony among all living creatures, which means the Buddha does not ever slander, or if he hears slander, he does not repeat it so as not to cause dissension among people or friends. He does not speak false speech. He does not lie at all. He does not speak, say, harsh speech. He doesn't scold people. Even if you do something wrong, he always uses kind words to make you see what you have done wrong instead of scolding you. Idle chatter, he does not speak for frivolous reasons. He only speaks when there's a reason to speak. And he always speaks at the right time. He speaks only what is correct. And he's always to the point. He doesn't beat around the bush. So what I'm trying to actually say is, he doesn't do that. Yeah.
Okay, so number 23. So his teeth are white, even, and close. Number 20. Is that number 23 now?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
They're 2 in 1.
2 in 1. Oh, it's 2 in 1. Okay. So what else about it? So it says that he's also has not learned his living by the 5 wrong livelihoods, which are what? Flattery was one. Kind of pressuring people. Extortion. Basically saying to someone that if he or she doesn't give money, then they'll expose their secrets. Bribery or pretense. So the Buddha does not use, you could say, wrong speech or wrong actions in his dealings with people to get his livelihood. So he has, white and even close teeth. And he says that in addition, he's never spoken for, this one says 3 zillion eons. I'm guessing it's probably a translation of countless, or maybe a zillion. So many eons. He's always been honest, never devious or crooked with others. So he's straight. That makes sense. You have straight teeth, you've been straight speech. Straight speech.
Also, his teeth are free of stains.
Yeah.
Maybe because he doesn't smoke or drink coffee, or tea. And then we move to the next one. 4 pure white canine teeth. Apparently, the Buddha has 4 incisors. How do you spell it? Incisors? Yeah, and if you look at the pictures, these teeth still exist till today. They're on display in, I believe there's a temple in Sri Lanka that houses one of them. I think there's one in China. Is that right? They were distributed after the Buddha's death by King Ashoka. And this came about from the Buddha rejecting long livelihood. I think this is, the teeth are all more or less, the reasons are all the same. Refraining from cheating with false weights and measures. If you can buy things, I remember in Malaysia, if you go to in the past, if you go to a medicine shop, the proprietor would use a scale with a sliding weight. So he wouldn't cheat by using a different weight that's marked differently. He does not bribe. He doesn't do corruption. He doesn't do deceptive practices. Basically, everything he does is always trustworthy and on the straight and, I'll call it straight and narrow. Straight and narrow.
Next one, jaws like a lion. Wow, it's a lion. His cheeks are round and full like those of a lion, from his having rid himself completely of idle chatter and senseless speech. The Pali, Sanskrit, and Chinese traditions explain this feature in reference to the Buddha's jawbone or chin. So we often hear the saying, the Buddha roars the lion's roar. When he speaks, he's got a force behind it. So you can see the lion has a very, you could say, regal kind of appearance.
Okay, the next one is the Buddha has apparently saliva that improves the taste of all food. So he doesn't need MSG or soy sauce, soya sauce or anything like pickles or anything to improve his food. And this comes from, having nursed the sick, the old and the infirm, and having especially cared for those whom others find distasteful and repulsive. And this is true. There's one of the stories in the this is not in the Jataka. There was a monk during the Buddha's time who had all these sores covering his body, and none of the other monks wanted to take care of this monk. But the Buddha actually, he went to this monk and he cleaned the wounds, and slowly the wounds healed. So these are all hallmarks that the Buddha has because he used to do all these things in the past. But when the Buddha was alive, he still continued doing all these things as well.
So it also says that whatever food he eats, no matter what, it always tastes delicious.
Even if you're a bad cook.
Yeah. So he ever delicious. But the interesting thing with Buddhism is that it's delicious, but he also has no attachment. So it's not that when we cultivate, we become dead into the food, but he has no attachment. So it's delicious, but no attachment. So, okay, number 27 and 28 together is a vast and long tongue. We often hear that one in the Avatamsaka Sutra, and a deep and resonant voice. So the Buddha's tongue is extremely long and can reach all the way up to the top of his head, his ears, and his chest. So that's a long tongue. And this comes from him speaking kindly to other people and encouraging and having treated others gently as an animal licking its young. Often, other places also associated with honesty. It's truth. It's something you can rely on. His voice is melodious, like that of an ancient songbird, flowing without any effort, or like that of Brahma, who is a god, right? One of the high gods. Whoever hears the voice of a Brahma is temporarily relieved of his or her problems. But the sound of the Buddha's melodious and resonant enlightening speech can bring about full liberation from all fears. The cause for this faculty is his having communicated the Dharma in the individual languages of each wandering being.
Another way to look at the first one, the vast and long tongue, is that the Buddha's sound travels far in the sense that his teachings are accepted by many. And throughout, if you understand Buddhist cosmology, throughout where you go, you can hear the Buddha sound all the time. And the second one, a deep and resonant voice, some texts refer to the Buddha's voice as like the bird Kalavinka. The bird Kalavinka is an Indian bird that has a really nice sound. I actually have it on my laptop. But the Kalavinka bird that I have is a real bird. All right, the bird that's referred to as Kalavinka is the Kalavinka bird from Amitabha's Pure Land, and it's actually in the stained glass behind. It said that the sound of the Kalavinka bird is so melodious that when the bird is in the egg, you can already start hearing its voice as it sings. Yeah.
What is one?
Eyes violet blue. So the Buddha has nice blue eyes. It says the black and white portions of a Buddha eyes are clear and distinct. It's not red or it's not yellow. And this is the result of his having looked at others with compassionate eyes. Imagine that. He always looks at you with a really kind gaze. Okay? And having worked for their welfare and generated equal concern for all, whether their suffering was great or small. So can you imagine going to someone like the Buddha and he's always looking at you nicely with very kind eyes, and he uses very nice words no matter what you've done to make you feel good, right? And let me see. Some texts say that the Buddha's eyes are dark blue, like a blue water lily, or some people say that it's just blue. Yeah.
Okay, number 30 is eyelashes like a royal bull.
Real eyelashes, not the ones you stick on.
Yeah. So his eyelashes are beautiful and long like those of a bull, which with each hair distinct. So he doesn't need eyeliner and all the stuff. This comes from having regarded others without any attachment, hostility, or naivety. And his having his trying to gain the full length of discriminating awareness to see the difference of what is correct and what is not correct. So he just basically wants to understand true principle, what's true, what's not, what's correct, what's not correct. And so he then has these eyelashes. Okay.
No more mascara, right? That's mascara, right? For eyelashes? Okay. I know my cosmetics.
I don't know my cosmetics.
Okay, next one. The Buddha has a white hair tuft between his eyebrows, which emits light. Like in the Shurangama Sutra, when the sutra began, the Buddha was emitting light, and it described as this. It says this curl of hair curls very tightly clockwise, and you can actually pull it from its tip. And when you pull it, it extends. Let me see, a huge distance, and when released, that it recalls. Okay, if you see the Buddha, I don't suggest that you do this. Okay, but that's what it says here. It says this is one of the more difficult signs to achieve and is the result of having served all his superiors with respect. His parents, his teachers, his elders, his spiritual masters, and so forth. Yep. So you can try this out when you become a Buddha yourself. Or when you cultivate to the point when you have this, and then you can pull it out, then you let it go and see what happens.
Just said he said having respected them as his crown jewel. So it's like you probably he put those seniors and those teachers really high up, something very important. The next one is the cowl on the summit of his crown. We've often translated this as the prominence at the top of his head, a kind of a prominence. So where does this come from? It comes from, it's made of radiant flesh. It's a little bit hard to. So round and circling clockwise, when seen from a distance, it seems to be 4 finger widths high, but upon closer scrutiny, its height can never be measured. So it changes size. This is the most difficult physical feature to achieve as the result of his having always visualized his spiritual mentor on the crown of his head, as well as his having visited temples and monasteries and engaged in spiritual practices there. So here's one about, the last two have been about filial. He's been filial. If you see images of Guanyin Bodhisattva, oftentimes you'll see a little Buddha on top of her head. And people know that Buddha's what that's supposed to represent. Yeah, Amitabha Buddha. So, because Amitabha Buddha is Guanyin Bodhisattva's teacher in the Pure Land. So she has Amitabha Buddha on top of her head.
Does anyone have any questions up to this point? This is the last slide. And this concludes the 3-week installment of the 32 hallmarks of the Buddha. So these 32 hallmarks are major characteristics. There are also a list of 80 minor characteristics which we will not go through, but it describes his fingers and toes. It describes the lines on his palms. It goes into very great detail. His fingernails, his ears, as you know, or as you may not. The Buddha always has long ears. It describes his face. Let me see, what are the more interesting things to... His face is long and beautiful. His cheeks are radiant. His cheek cavities are fully rounded and smooth. His forehead is well proportioned in length and breadth. His forehead is rounded and beautiful. And it goes on and on. His ears are long like lotus petals. His ear holes are beautifully rounded. The 5 nerves of his eyes are unblemished. I guess that means that you don't see his red veins in his eyes. Yeah. His breath is always fine. His mouth always has a beautiful smile, kind of like Mona Lisa sometimes if you look at some of the pictures. His mouth has the scent of a lotus flower. His tongue is soft, rosy tinted, and rounded, and so on. Yep.
So is there any questions?
Online?
Online, or everybody in the... Probably pull up the projector slide and...
So before we stop and do the transference, does everyone remember again the 4 ways of gathering in? At the back.
Okay. Collaboration.
Yes. Benefiting people, okay. Kind words. Giving them things. Okay. Good. Close enough. Remember, if you want to make friends, no matter where you go, use any of these 4. Okay? Kind words, give them something, give them a compliment. It doesn't need to be something material. Kind words, giving...
Similar work.
And what's that?
Beneficial action.
Beneficial
Help them
actions.
out.
Just help them out. Okay,
Yeah.
Be kind. Just treat people with compassion and be genuine when you speak to them, and you'll always make friends.
So in the very end, maybe we have a couple announcements. So next week, we will be inviting Dharma Master Fen from the City of 10,000 Buddhas to help give the lecture. And we will have, what else is happening? Still we're on break.
DRBU classes are starting?
DRBU classes are starting at the City of 10,000 Buddhas. But here in Berkeley, the classes are going to start January 27th, the Monday class. Marty's class is going to be on January 31st, the Friday class. So that's still about 2 weeks away. What other questions or other announcements?
We have a new class that begins on the 27th, which is a Monday, and that's really recommended for people who are new or young people, or both. Young people who are new to Buddhism.
Yeah. It's called Buddhism and the Modern Mind, and it's going to be kind of like hip modern topics, but using the sutra's wisdom to kind of guide it. That's kind of the trend we're trying out. With Doug Powers, if people have not had an opportunity to listen to him speak, he has a lot of experience speaking with young people. So it's definitely recommended. And then on Thursdays, we will still have roundtable, but that'll start on the 27th, the week of 27th. Okay. Yes, question. Yeah. Old people are welcome to attend too.
As long as you are young at heart.
Young at heart.
Yes, Angela? Yes. We will begin another new class that's based on the sutra in 42 sections. And that's really good for people who have, say, a basic understanding or don't have any understanding about Buddhism, but want to come in and not just discuss what Buddhism is all about, but to go slowly, to go deeper and deeper into the principles of Buddhism. So that's every alternate Thursday. What happens is on one Thursday, we will have the round table in the dining hall. And then the next Thursday, we will have this class based on the Sutra in 42 sections.
Yeah, so the format, that'll be a little bit of a smaller discussion group, so people can actually investigate the sutras and discuss it and try to think about it in a slightly different approach than say in this lecture. So that's what happened, alternating Thursdays in the dining hall. Yes.
Yes, Alan.
So we do have it online. There's a special, because I'll explain that very quickly how we want to do the online part, at least for now, is that over the years, we've been doing very many Guanyin sessions and Amitabha sessions and various retreats. And over the years, these people have come to those retreats and been very inspired. And then they go back to, say, somewhere far away from a DRBA monastery, Minnesota or Southern California or something, and they go, well, I don't have any Dharma to really plug into. And so the idea was to give these people a place where they can create a community. So the intent of the online community is actually to really, over time, cultivate an online community of practitioners, and then give them an opportunity to listen to the Dharma, maybe have a forum where they can ask questions among each other, and we can answer questions as well. And so the thought was, so it's not going to just be kind of like an open broadcast like what we have for these lectures. It's something that people would actually register in for, because it's kind of like you're going into a community. And to start out, what we were thinking is people who already have had some experience within the Dharma, particularly like a session, so that that they have a cultivation place to reference to. So when we have discussions about cultivation, they've actually had some experience to say, oh yeah, I understand what they're talking about when they're talking about cultivation. So, I mean, it's not a hard requirement. So people are interested that who might have some Buddhist background, who might be far away, you can just ask us and we can kind of get them registered and talk with them to see if they're... But I think the idea is to create a sense of community so that people, when they come, it's not like you're just checking it out and then you're just dropping out. It's like you actually feel like you're joining something that has some thoughtfulness around it to help create a Dharma community. And the idea is that from those communities, maybe some people might, as a group, want to come over to attend a session or to cultivate. But the class itself, the physical class, people are welcome just to come in, because we'll have that happening.
Can I clarify something? Yeah. How about people who are not registered but they just want to view they just want like a podcast of the class? Would that be available?
I think currently not. We're not having that, just to create the community. So if you want to get the audio and those kind of things, it's you'd have to basically, people who come here for our lectures, for sure, you're welcome to join, because you've already kind of had a sense of the Dharma. But the idea was to not, to kind of little bit by little bit create a sense of community. And over time, maybe we'll open more and more, so more people will be involved with it. But just start out small and then kind of grow from a core group. So. Registration. We'll have it on the DRBA website. If you're interested, leave us your email. We'll send you an email with the information. You can forward on to people who might be interested in registering. So yeah. But if you have feedback, we're welcome to feedback. We're just trying this experiment. The kind of the big vision that we'll have a lot of online communities of people practicing Dharma together who aren't around DRBA temples, and then they can maybe
the whole world,
over the whole world, given the online, and then they can all come to, because we do have 60,000 Buddhas in our retreats. They can all come as a group then, because they can meet online to be able to come to our retreats. So, okay. So the transference is on the back of our his guitar. So this is the skilled in music. Skilled in music. So the dedication of merit is on the back of your sheet. Wish to dedicate the merit wherever you like. Every living being, our minds as one and radiant with light, share the fruits of peace with hearts of goodness, luminous and bright. If people hear and see how hands and hearts can find in giving unity, may their minds awake to great compassion, wisdom, and to joy. May kindness find reward. May all who sorrow leave their grief and pain. May this boundless light break the darkness of their endless night. Because our hearts are one, this world of pain turns into paradise. May all become compassionate and wise. May all become compassionate and wise. Okay. So now please stand. Let your legs get some blood flow into them. And we'll stand up and bow to the Buddhas.